Our presentation today is titled National Retailer Dissects Frictionless Experiences with AI-Powered Virtual Agents. So now we're going to take a look at a video. I'll come back, do some housekeeping, and introduce our speakers.
Smart Action is so much more than just a technology company or an AI company. They really are a customer experience company.
With the Smart Action tool, someone calls in and the first thing they hear is, "Thank you for calling JustFab, how may I help you?" They don't even have to say the word shipping, they don't have to say the number one, they can just say anything they want.
And when you have that natural language feel to it, it's pretty amazing, the response.
The customer experience does not suffer. It is a natural conversation.
Interactive properties allow it to perform at a level that's at or even above sometimes a human's.
Automation can sound really scary, but it is worth it.
It was a cost savings of $1.1 million. Just within the first quarter of implementing, we also saw a decrease in average handle time and an increase in containment rate, which resulted in a member satisfaction score of 92%.
We actually saw customer sat rates go up. We saw a reduction in calls of that variety by over 85%, reduced our overall call volumes by 25%.
Not only did we see a reduction in handle time, our CSAT increased by 30% after we launched with Smart Action.
It was able to prove itself and return the ROI that we expected, and probably even more so.
This application was able to pay for itself within a month. We actually saw our best numbers to date, company-wide, history-wide, the month after implementation.
It's given us virtual agents that we couldn't possibly have at a moment's notice and scale up and scale down at a level that you can't possibly do otherwise.
We've actually not hired any additional staff, but our customer base has grown by nearly 400,000 customers.
Smart Action has been our partner every single step of the way, and they have been nothing but fantastic to work with.
Smart Action truly is an extension of the purchasing power team.
We are relying on this quite heavily for our future.
Or that we're evolving and changing the way we need to, and we've definitely been able to do that through our relationship with Smart Action.
Thank you for calling. How can I help you today?
At this point, I'm going to introduce our speakers. We've got Brian Morin, Chief Marketing Officer at Smart Action, and Artie Kozenboom. You may recognize him from the video. I believe he had a cameo role in it, and he is the Director, GMS Technology and WFM Technology at TechStyle Fashion Group, and really happy to have an actual practitioner here. So take it away, Brian.
We were actually going to kick this off with just the about Smart Action, but after that commercial, I think everybody's had enough of hearing about Smart Action already. We've come here actually to sit down and talk to Artie, as Bob mentioned, a real life practitioner with a conversational AI, self-service as a whole, from an omnichannel standpoint. The focus of today's conversation is going to be over voice. Now, Artie is certainly doing more than just voice. He relies on Smart Action for the voice aspect. We operate the AI-powered CX for more than 100 brands. And while a number of our customers will use us for their other digital channels as well, Artie on his team, they actually manage that piece on their own. And we'll share just a little bit about why he's bifurcating his experiences. But Artie has been in this space for a while. Artie, you were early adopter of technology coming into the space. So you're looking through the lens where others might be a little newer approaching this technology. You've actually kind of been through all the early bumps and bruises and reaching to the point where we see a lot of maturization of the technology, but now is taking that mature technology and finding out how do you deliver that best of breed experience. So Artie, what I'm going to do is throw it over to you to tell us just a little bit about yourself and a little bit about TechStyle, and then we'll get into what we talked about, really kind of dissecting and getting into the anatomy of really what is a frictionless experience and what is going on behind the scenes to make those frictionless experience. For those that don't know, Artie is actually also a recent publisher with a book that he published last year or the end of 2019, somewhere in that time frame, that shares a little bit of his journey and revolutionizing a contact center to be taking advantage of the latest and greatest technologies and best practices along the way. So Artie, let me throw it over to you. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about TechStyle.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, for the warm introduction. Thanks, Bob, for hosting and helping us, with the session. This slide's a little outdated in that I feel like during the last 18 months, it felt like dog years, like it was like 7 years living through the pandemic. I have a little bit more than 10 years experience in the contact center realm. My area of focus is around customer service, customer success, site operations, technology, recruiting, and people development. So really that kind of trifecta of people, process, and product, or we like to call it technology, and blending all three together. I like to say if I was a NASCAR driver, these would be the logos that would be on my jacket or on my car. I used to work at a company called MindBody and then migrated down south to LA and worked for a company called Cornerstone On Demand. And then just recently in the last 5 years, migrated over to a company called TechStyle, which is a conglomerate group that supports, on the customer service side, supports 5 different brands, and we're launching another brand next year. So we launch a brand almost every 2 years or every year now. So some of the logos you might have heard of: JustFab, FabKids, ShoeDazzle, Fabletics, and Savage X Fenty. We are a membership-based organization, and we have BPO workers that are working around the globe to help support these 5 different brands. We like to partner with celebrities. They're really our marketing engine across social media and then also across all of their public channels. And what we do is we curate collections that are unique to what those celebrities pick out every single day. So literally, Kate Hudson comes into our office back when we had an office that allowed people to come in to pick out all the different fashion setting things for Fabletics for the next month, for the next month's collection. What we do is we do a membership model. So we're not only the e-commerce online retailer where you've got those questions like, where's my order? I need a return or exchange. But we also have a membership model. So people can join our membership. They can have curated boxes created digitally for them to choose all the different things that they want in their upcoming month, which means that we also need to support different intents, like I need to cancel my membership, update my password, update my billing information, things like that. Or one of our most common one is skip the month, which if you ever belong to a membership, let's say you've got groceries that get delivered to your front door, we have the ability to allow our customers skip the month so that they don't have to pay for this month, and they put that membership on pause for 1 month.
So Artie, maybe you can share just a little bit about the width and breadth of your metrics and calls and chats.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very, very phone heavy. We get 6 million phone calls per year. We're actually going to hit the 7 million mark in 2021. We get 3 million chats annually. Chat has actually grown dramatically in the last 18 months. So this slide is outdated. We're going to be projected to hit almost 6 million chat conversations for 2021, almost doubling about a year and a half ago. Our conversations are usually about 9 minutes long. Our agents take calls one-on-one, and then for chats, they try to do at least 3 at a time. So we're a little bit more efficient from an agent model on the chat channel. We also support our members across social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram Direct, because that's where they find out about our product and our membership model. Some of the areas that we support our customers, we're a global company. We do support shipping for some of our brands across almost every country in the world. And we do manufacture all of our products around the world and then distribute them out of multiple different facilities across the world. Here's just a great footprint that shows where our agents are today. We have over 1,000 agents. We spike up to about 2,000 agents during the high peak months.
And so right here in front of you, this is just a snapshot of the voice self-service performance in 2020. This shows the mix between partial containment, non-containment, partial containment, and full containment with AI. As you can see, many of these calls, the middle section, they may be ultimately intended for a human, but Artie has the AI doing some of the upfront authentication, intent capture, data gathering before handing off the baton to a live agent with context to pick up where the AI left off. And in that section below, you can see those bottom intents. Well, those are intended for self-service only. Just to give a little bit of the top down. Artie, I think the best place to start before we kind of get into dissecting is everyone kind of starts at the front end on what are the big challenges that starts to push you down the path of considering, are we going to take our precious CX that we don't want to disparage in any way, that we trust our humans to do, and then convert those human interactions, and how do we adapt them and take them through a conversion process to human to AI to ensure that the experience is good or better than live agents. There is clearly there's a gap going from one to the other, and there has to be some challenges that you're facing that cause you to want to walk that gap. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that origin story at TechStyle.
Yeah, it's a great origin story. There's really 3 challenges that we face, and most companies have these similar challenges. Some companies are uniquely different. The first one I like to always touch on is the seasonal volume spike. So as an e-commerce online retailer, obviously after Black Friday, we have a huge spike of contact volume, changing the workforce demand needs from 1,000 agents to almost 3,000 or 4,000 agents, but just for like a single day or maybe 2 days out of the week for the whole year. Very, very, very hard to spin up a couple thousand agents just to pay them for 1 month or just a couple weeks. So what we wanted to do was start to deliver some self-service options over the voice channel, which is our highest volume channel, to enable and allow our members to be able to self-serve so that they don't have to go to a live agent, so that we could have the right size amount of live agents answering calls and we don't have a long wait time. So seasonal volume spikes was really important for us to address. That second one, it kind of leads into the second one, which is agents who are doing mundane things like answering a call and clicking a button and then hanging up the call. That's literally all of those self-service tasks, transactional type tasks, created high churn. Agents don't want to take 80 calls a day and just click a button, the same button 80 single times throughout their day. That's not a very rewarding, fulfilling role. So we were having a hard time with retaining our agents. And then, of course, that coming from that, trying to find talent who would be willing to do those types of tasks on a regular basis, hiring them, and then onboarding them, because of course, everyone knows you lose weeks and or months when you're hiring people to backfill people who just left. And then the last thing, which is really important, is we wanted to make sure that when we were implementing or rolling out these automations and self-service tools, we weren't sacrificing the customer experience. We are a very membership-driven, celebrity-driven brand. So our brand presence, our brand name, our NPS score has to be very, very, very high. Otherwise, our celebrities will say, you know what, the brand isn't doing well, we're going to move to something else. We're going to promote, our other brands, the ones that are really speaking our language and using our name properly. So we wanted to make sure that when we were automating and doing self-service, we weren't sacrificing the customer experience. And one of the things I like to call out, because Brian, you talked about this earlier, was we talk about voice, and we started a voice bot before we did a chat bot. And one of the reasons we did that was because we knew that was going to be the harder and more complex channel to do it across. And with Smart Action, the actual voice, or IVA, that talks back, the natural language voice, it has a robotic accent, but it really is easy to converse with and easy to talk to. It doesn't sound like that synthetic robot that you might hear through an IVR.
So Artie, organizations listening in, I think you share a lot of those same challenges and can identify with that. Now, the difference was you were able to navigate this conversation within your own organization up to key stakeholders and executives in the organization to get them to buy into the same vision that you should be handing some of your customer experience over to AI. How, maybe you can talk just a little bit about what were you able to do to successfully navigate that through an organization the size of TechStyle Fashion Group?
Yeah, great question. And that's, I love this slide because it really is conversational AI. We could have implemented or rolled out just a advanced IVR or something that could slightly understand what the member is requesting, but it doesn't really create a conversation with the customer or the member. One of the things that we started with was we took our executives, we flew them all the way across the Pacific to the Philippines, sat them down and forced them to take calls for 8 hours straight. And that sounds a little crazy and intense, but them sitting, wearing the shoes, we're a shoe company. So, being in the shoes of our agents, what are they doing day by day, 8 hours a day before we had conversational AI in place? And resetting passwords and clicking the same button over and over and over again, they understood that these transactional type conversations really needed to be, these simple conversations really needed to be automated. So we pulled them into a room, did a little breakout session and said, well, how can we automate this? And we all decided, let's not do it in a very cheap fashion and have it be a robotic answer back. We wanted to make sure that it was extremely conversational so that when the caller calls in, and you saw this in the infomercial earlier before we started the session, when the caller calls in, they could literally say anything under the sun. It's going to understand full sentences, nouns, intents, and verbs, and then output them into the appropriate path to have the conversation with them. And if they need to jump around in that conversation, so maybe they go down this path of they need to know where their order is, they kind of almost get to the end of that path, and they say, you know what, actually, I want to change my membership. They could jump to a different path or different conversation easily without having to hang up the phone and call back in or request to speak to a live agent.
Now, I promise the audience we are going to get into dissecting some of these frictionless experiences in a minute, just to get to the full anatomy behind them. Artie, this is really a good place to start. You mentioned these high volume, transactional repetitive call types that your agents are handling that made candidates for AI. And I know on screen you have a number of those listed. Every organization is going to be different. But when you start to look through the lens of your interactions to find out what actually requires complex critical thinking or what actually requires human judgment, you start to look through the path of maybe not looking through the lens of maybe a little upside down how some might look at it today, where they are using their humans for most everything and finding out where are the gaps to fill in AI. Frankly, you took a different approach, Artie, where you looked at, well, what is everything AI can handle, and then let's use humans to fill in the gaps after.
Yep, exactly. And we took the approach of saying, okay, we've got maybe two large buckets. We call them intents, but two large buckets. It's someone's calling with regards to their account, their member account, or they're calling about their order. Where's my order, return exchange, refund my order, or something like that. And we said, okay, of those those intents, what are the sub intents? Then each one of those kind of categorize into 3 or 4 or 5 different areas, and then from there, what are the things that are serviceable by a self-service tool or an IVA or something within the IVR, and what are the things that can't be serviced, and then also what are the things that can partially be serviced. Maybe we can authenticate the member, pass it over to an agent. The agent already knows where the bot stopped, so they could pick up where the bot left off. So for example, if someone has a return or an exchange and they want to return a shoe because it's the wrong size, the bot can understand all of that context, give it to the agent in a very digestible fashion, either over the voice prompt so they could hear it in their headset before they answer, or visually, and we do it visually in text form, saying that this person would like to return this type of shoe because it's too small, or the wrong color or something like that. Take something that's the collection of information, which is rather simple, and then passing it over to a live agent to do the more complex thing, because we may not have a different size of that shoe or a different color that matches the color palette of the member. Another thing to call out here on this slide is we used to use Nice in Contact. We now use Genesis. One of the reasons why we wanted to stay with Smart Action over the last 7 years and beyond is that Smart Action can be used for multiple different telcos, can be used as its own IVR. You can plug and play it with all sorts of different tools and technologies because they've got open API and in the cloud. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to partner with Smart Action, was because it was easy for us to, from a technology standpoint, integrate into tools. And if we need to hot swap any other tools around the Smart Action ecosystem, the Smart Action team is very easy to work with to do that.
So we're going to take just a minute. We are going to showcase one 90-second call sample, and then we're going to break that down and dissect it on why that was such a frictionless experience and how, both from a technology design standpoint and also some business rules that Artie and his team have put together that can help AI deliver some of these seamless experiences. Now on screen, just gives a little bit of the context though of really what we're talking about. This is the same really criteria that you should be using to evaluate through your own lens when you're looking at technology. There are different gradients of speech technology stacks in the marketplace today that range on the far left, which you could consider the simplest, where maybe at least on the speech side you have what's known as directed dialogue on one side. That relies on single word commands and nothing more. And all the way to the full spectrum of really what we're talking about today, which is true conversational AI on the other side. And somewhere in the middle is where you get a lot of these players that are using advanced ASR engines, automated speech recognition engines from players like an Amazon, a Google, or Microsoft. And we like some of those own players ourselves for some of our use cases on the front end. But that group in the middle, they'll sometimes use those engines just right out of the box, because they will work right out of the box, and they're relying on speech to text transcriptions. However, that's only so good. We all know that experience from trying it on our phone and having to go back and correct 2 or 3 words because it's never 100% right. But to deliver the types of experience that you want to deliver for customers, you do have to push that pendulum much further over to the right of what we're talking about, where you're going beyond just good speech to text engines, and you're leveraging the one advantage you have in the contact center, which is the power prediction. And we'll show you that in a minute. And so with advanced NLU techniques today, you can tailor the AI and pattern match your customer grammars to the intents that you expect to hear to any given question. And the reason that's important is because even your very best speech to text engine is wrong, and wrong more often than you realize. And so when that transcription doesn't match an intent that you're listening for, you do need to have that technology tailoring that has been done, that's been tailored to your business, that can kick in and narrow the choice to the language acoustic models that are closest to what you expected to hear. And ultimately, it's this area of tailoring and ability to run confidence scores against what you expected to hear. That's the biggest development in conversational AI today.
Yeah, the only thing I like to add on this slide, Brian, is that sometimes you'll see engines, and I love the analogy too, like an NLP or a natural language processing engine. Think of an engine as getting you from point A to point B. It's not going to know why it's going to point B. You just turn it on and it goes. Whereas the conversational AI bots that we use you guys for at Smart Action, it's really a brain. It's really processing. It's really that blue icon on the left predicting why customers are calling, and then the green one on the bottom left which is recognition and cognition, which is really that understanding of what the person is saying and why they're saying it, and predicting potentially where they want to go in the next part of the flow.
So we kind of laid out how this works from a theoretical standpoint. Well, let's take a look at this, and what does this actually mean in a real world scenario with a real customer calling in? That's what this is. In fact, this is a good clip just because it's 90 seconds long, so none of us have to wait and watch for very long. And you'll see how this call starts in a position where the caller starts in a position of tension, and 90 seconds later, you'll see how that tension was brought to resolution in just 90 seconds. So we'll play the call, and then we're going to dissect piece by piece on what made this a frictionless experience.
Hello, thank you for calling Fabletics. How can I help you today?
Billing.
I'd be happy to help you with your billing question. Is the name on the account Sarah Peters?
Yes.
Are you calling about the $49.95 charge billed on or around July 19th?
Yes.
Okay, what's your question regarding this charge?
I skipped the month. I should not have received this charge.
Looks like you were charged because you did not make a purchase or skip by the 5th of the month. This charge is added to your account as a member credit that you can use at any time. Would you like to keep the credit in your account?
No, I'd like to be refunded the money as I skipped the month on July 3rd.
Okay, no problem. Your refund has been successfully processed. Please note that it may take up to 7 business days for your bank account to reflect the change. Is that everything for today?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your call and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so the I know that from the outside veneer, this it sounds kind of simple on the outside, when in fact there's actually a ton of complexity that's going on in the background to make this a frictionless experience. So let's dive into some of the anatomy around this. So the first piece of it you'll notice is that, as already mentioned before, it is a true natural language interaction. The call starts with an open-ended question. How can I help you today? And going back to what Artie mentioned earlier, back to the tailoring and what the AI is listening for, this is where we've worked in Artie and his team to identify what are all the associated grammars that might come flying out of a customer's mouth, and have trained models to match those to intents that we are expecting to hear. And as I mentioned, the case where your speech to text is wrong or that transcription is wrong, being the ability to examine the language acoustic models of what was heard so you can find the closest intent of what you expected to hear. Now, you'll see that the other element in this piece is the area prediction. After she said billing, the AI runs an algorithm against recent customer behavior to determine if she should get the standard billing response, or should there be a more insightful in question that can actually predict why she might be calling. And so in this case, the business rules triggered a predictive response. Are you calling about your most recent charge on or around, I forget the date, sometime in July? And a couple things make that extra layer of design and training really important. And first is that it showcases that there's a level of intelligence between the customer and the live agent, which inspires confidence in the caller to continue with the automated system instead of just trying to zero out and wait on hold to speak to a human. But I think the second piece, just as important or more important, is that this now reduced the level of effort for the customer to get something done. We have eliminated one unnecessary back and forth question. But if we were to get back to the natural language nature of this, the AI knows that there's a billing dispute and does something that you wouldn't typically do with AI, and that's ask an open-ended question around the nature of their tension or dispute that could result in a long answer. So conversational AI doesn't like long answers. And in truth, conversational AI can only understand 5 meaningful words at a time. That's the current limit of what you can train into these models. Now, even as I say that, I know that there are some AI developers on our team sitting here listening in. They might even get a little squeamish that I said 5 words. If they were sitting in the audience, they might shift in their seat a little bit and say, Brian, can you please try to get that down to 4 meaningful words, or even just 3, because ultimately that reduces the training involved on your models. But in this case, even though the customer does reply with a long answer, and it's far too long for any AI to parse the meaning, you'll notice something here, that the AI is trained to pick up on what we call hot words, and then follow up with clarifying questions around that hot word, depending on whatever the hot word might be. And so in this 90-second conversation, you actually see that same design principle used twice. So you can see really one of the big tricks with AI, it isn't even around the modeling or training itself, it's around the design and how you can take a 5-word parsing limit, yet handhold somebody through a conversation and make them feel as though that they're having a true natural language experience. And so one of the pieces, frankly, in Artie, that even makes this work possible is work that Artie and his team did on their side, outlining clear handling rules on various disputes, because ultimately you have to eliminate the human judgment aspect from disputes in order for AI to be able to do what it's done. And you can see what Artie and his team have done to enable AI to do its job.
Yeah, and to take this one step further and talk a little bit about if AI wasn't in place and we had to have an agent take this call, remember, it would probably take about 9 minutes to resolve. Also, they would need to get a manager code. So they would have to pull in a team lead to come over and verify that this was okay for that agent to be able to process that refund. And the customer, depending on when they called, but if it was during our busiest time of the year, would have to wait on hold for a minute or 2 minutes before even speaking to an agent. So think about the level of frustration that could come from having live agents versus being able to solve and turn this customer around within 90 seconds. There was a great comment in the Q&A, and this is a good call out too. So the 2 times that in the example where it said, "What can I help you with?" Very open-ended question. You could say anything, and also, "What is your question about the charge?" Very open-ended. Instead of having in a traditional IVR, it'd be press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for that, and then even in a voice IVR, which is more of like a gated experience, you can do something like, "We notice that you have a question about this charge." You can tell it, you could say things like refund or "Why was I billed?" So you don't necessarily have to lead them down a path. You could just have an open-ended conversation and allow them to basically say whatever they want. And that's really the brain behind the tool set. And yeah, to Brian's point, a lot of data is being accessed in the background, but the data that's being accessed in the background, we're passing it over in just simple variables like the date and time of the last charge, the ability for this person to be refunded or not refunded based off of their lifetime value and customer value, and maybe if we have a valid credit card on file to be refunded to. So just some basic information that we send over to Smart Action, and then what Smart Action can do with their professional services and their team is create an ecosystem where they take those variables and then turn it into an AI or a natural language processing tool.
Artie, you bring up a great point about, otherwise if it were a human to human interaction, you're getting like manager involvement, you're needing an approval. The further that you can go as a contact center leader to define what are some really just clear handling rules that we can give AI. And another example, Artie, that just spawned off of that is we work with one of the top insurers worldwide who handles and we handle their glass claims if a windshield is damaged. And there was a point in that conversation where we would do the upfront triage, but then we would hand it over to a live agent who would kind of take through the approval for the claim and issue the claim number. And that's where this major insurer realized, if we know what the size of the damage is and it's under a certain size, we can just automatically approve the work to be done and auto-generate a claim to be made, and that completely eliminated a human from having to join in the loop. So it's anything where someone is calling you attention where it's dispute related. If you can find a resolution path that's a clear handling rule for AI to follow, that makes a big difference on the experience to your customer.
Yeah, and you brought up earlier that there's a lot of people who may be listening or maybe listening to the recording later who are just starting out this journey. And there was actually a question in the Q&A of what happened if they said no, or what happened if they went down a different path. I think a good best practice is start simple. Don't try to over-engineer your different outcomes and flow paths. Really, everything fails over to a live agent, which is designed as kind of like the fail-safe. But as you start to learn, and as Smart Action collects more information and data, you can work with Smart Action to learn that there's a new potential self-service path that you can create. And that's something that was super valuable for us when we went into the pandemic and people started saying words like COVID and pandemic and words that had never been uttered before. We understood that was a new potential path. And then we were answering questions over the IVR about how to cancel or put your membership on pause until the pandemic was over. So lots of different options and tools there at your disposal, but it's really important to not over-engineer your flows or your desired outcomes right off out of the gate.
Yeah, a great point, Artie. I mean, so showcases, I think, maybe a little bit of a pinnacle of the maturation of your organization getting to this point. These were not the experiences that were being delivered on day one, but as you were successfully self-serving customers, you were able to find those avenues where you could begin to go deeper. So let's Artie, I know that just for the sake of time, we have a couple really important slides to get to. I know we could actually probably do a full session just on this slide alone, because before someone gets started in automation over voice and or chat, you do have to pick the strategic direction on how you plan to tackle that channel. This is the classic buy versus build conversation where you choose, do we want to insource this, handle internally, procure a DIY SaaS product, build out your own internal team of resources and experts to design, build, and manage, or like in the case of TechStyle, what you chose, you actually chose both paths. You chose the path of DIY for chat, but then when it came to voice, you said, nope, let's outsource that channel. So maybe you could just step us through a little bit of how you came to that decision and the types of considerations someone should be making in choosing their own path.
Yeah, this is a really good slide, and it's super simple slide, but there's a lot of context behind it. Brian, you said it, you hit it around the head. I could talk about this for probably 3 hours straight, but couple recommendations. I would say if you're starting out and you have not done this before, definitely do not do it yourself. Imagine never tasting a pizza ever in your life and just having raw ingredients like flour and some pepperoni and some cheese and trying to figure out how to build a pizza from scratch, never having a picture of a pizza or ever having tasted one. It's going to be really hard to do. So I recommend, especially if you're starting out, start out with where your customers are. So on the voice channel is usually where the traditional channel is. And maybe chat for your organization or team. So maybe start there instead, but start where your customers are and start with a company that has done it in the past. Brian gave the example that they work with a lot of different verticals and industries. It was actually on the first slide, but we kind of skipped over it pretty quickly. We're an e-commerce online retailer. They work with insurance, they work with travel, all sorts of different verticals. They already know the common type of intents that come in. The AI algorithm is already there. They already know common flows. So why not go to them first, really use their best practices and their learnings over the last decade to your advantage, and then learn from it. And then if you feel comfortable, maybe go into the do-it-yourself path. From a technology standpoint, a lot of the tools out there for do-it-yourself, like Google Dialogflow, Amazon Lex, IBM Watson, they're good, but they're not great. Especially on the voice channel, they can't easily do things like recognize alphanumeric. So if you have an alphanumeric authentication use case, like someone has to say their policy number for AAA, that's really hard to do with a Google Dialogflow or Amazon Lex or Watson. Also, if they have to utter something that is like an email address. So what's your email address on file? And you say something, when they say the word at or the word dot, it's not going to know at symbol. It's going to think the word AT. And when you say dot, it's not going to know a period. It's going to say the letters DOT. So you have to then take that response, use some sort of middleware to convert that into the proper format. Let's say it's email format or a phone format. And then you put it into your API call and try to do a match. So there's a lot of processing from a technology standpoint. That's a middle layer that you get out of the box when you partner with someone instead of doing it yourself. So those are kind of the two big things that I call out.
Yeah. Artie, I think here, on this slide, I mean, each one of these questions really could be standalone as their own slide and discussion when someone is getting started on their AI-powered self-service journey, or they're started it, now they're trying to mature it. There's still a lot of unknowns. You originally started with some of these key considerations, but now you've gone so far on your journey. I mean, that call example was a good example where you've really fully fleshed out, each of these. You've operationalized them, with your own set of best practices. So, Maybe you could just talk, when you see organizations struggle in their self-service deployments, what do you think are some of the most common mistakes?
Yeah, and this is a great slide to screenshot too. I don't have the answers for your unique organization, although these are the questions you should be asking yourself and asking your team. I could answer these really quickly. What should I do before I get started? Get executive buy-in. Get people who are the decision makers to be able to back AI and back this decision. Any guidelines on how to automate, how much or how little. Start small. Don't try to boil the ocean. You don't want to do everything all at once. Start small. Don't make it overly complex. Do basically a proof of concept. Which interaction should you automate first? I said this earlier. Really go where your customers are. If you're a phone-heavy channel, focus on phone. If you're chat, focus on chat. You'll notice that when you do start to implement something like this, people will gravitate to it. So if you start in phone, you'll get more people using your phone service, your phone number, because they know they can get self-service through it, as opposed to going to chat where they have to wait for a live agent. So just think about those channels and think about that as you're deploying that. And then talking about CX, measure it. Measure your CSAT, your NPS, your customer experience. For people who are self-contained as well too. Did they like the self-service containment model? Did they not? The majority of the people out there love to self-serve. They love to do things on their own. We're a very fast-paced society at this point. I want things now. I want to be able to do it myself. I don't want to have to rely on others to do these simple tasks. But you should measure that. Maybe your member profile or your customer profile may not be similar to that. Maybe they want to talk to a live human. So it's important to measure that and understand who your client base is first.
Yeah. So Bob, what we're going to do is, I know we're just getting a little short on time, so we're going to make this the last slide, and then we'll throw it over to you so we can jump into Q&A. I know a number of comments and questions have come in. Artie, one thing people don't typically understand about conversational AI, it's not just design and build and then poof, you're done. So after go live, we've chatted a little. There is a maturation process. This is a solution that it does require ongoing care and feeding, so you can continue to improve the containment, continue to improve CX. So, after all, I mean, you are trying to have conversations with machines, and you just never really know how people are going to interact with AI until they do. Can you step us through just a little bit of this process of improvement over time, and what should someone expect, and how long do you feel like it takes to work through that process of iteration to really fully shake out an application over time?
Yeah, and if you did it yourself, you would really need either an individual person for each one of these colors on the left, or you would need a couple people on your team to own and manage some of these. So you really need project management, reporting analytics, training and tuning. I would say training and tuning is the most important one. It's kind of like a garden. You don't want it to be unkept, otherwise weeds will grow in it, and the AI will not do what it was initially designed for. Enhancements and upgrades, this is extremely important. If you're not partnering with someone that basically manages those enhancements and upgrades on your behalf, you may need to have an expert. Let's say you're using Google Dialogflow. You may need to have a Google expert, an engineer who's just looking at all the feature updates, making sure that any of these updates aren't changing the environment or changing the natural language processing tool. And then you want to go back into a design model. So after you train and tune, there's some updates. You want to make sure that you're feeding that back into the original project, the original tool set. And then at the end of you need some business outcomes. So reporting and analytics, that'll get you kind of halfway, but you really need use case mapping. You need to understand, is this driving ROI? Is this driving lifetime value? Is this a valuable spend, not only budget-wise, but also time and energy-wise on the services side? So really think of it holistically. I highly recommend starting with a partner with this. SmartAction is a great partner. We've used them for almost a decade now. We started on the phone channel, I think about 8 years ago. And it's been iterative, and we could have designed our own, but it just doesn't make sense from a financial model for us to hire 6 dedicated people on my team. Instead, I have a single person who manages the account, And we have a team of people who support us on the Smart Action side. And whenever something comes up, we can pull from a resource on the Smart Action side, like an engineer, to really understand and make changes and tweaks. So that's what I would really recommend is focusing on this as more than just a plug and play. The one thing I'll leave you with on this slide, because it's really cool, and I heard another person say it, so I can't take credit. Treat your AI or your self-service tool like it's an employee of your organization.
Mm-hmm.
You would never want to hire an employee, lock them in a room, and say, "We'll see you in 10 years. I hope you do well." You want to make sure that that employee is doing well. It has a career path. It has growth. It is plugged into the rest of the organization as if it is an employee.
Yeah, great point, Artie. So I do want to make a plug, though, for your book right before we go and hand this back over to Bob. Artie, they can find this on Amazon.com.
Find it on Amazon, or just ping Brian or I, and we'll set up a time or a meeting, and then we'll send you one in the mail.
Yep, absolutely. Bob, we'll throw this over to you and see if we can't stump Artie with some questions here today.
Okay, great. Artie, thanks so much for being here, and I'm definitely picking up a copy of your book. Here's a question, and I'm gonna pose this to Artie. Can you speak to customer satisfaction between virtual agents versus live agents with your customers? You work for a high-end fashion brand, and those people intuitively, at least to me anyway, don't seem like they would. It seems like they would prefer live agents. I don't know. Correct me.
Yeah, great call out. We noticed that our customers and our members were calling us about 2 times per year, which is not too often. So it's 2 touch points. And initially, before we implemented self-service, we said it's only 2 times a year. We want to make sure that we have white glove service. We want to send them to a live agent. And we measured the CSAT as a result of that. We hovered for our live agents at that time a little bit in the low 80s, high 70s. And one of the reasons was the majority of the time our customers call, and I think this is a question in the Q&A, spikes around a very specific time frame. So they had to wait a while in a queue, and then they had to talk to a person for longer than they had expected. So when someone calls into your organization, they have some sort of number in their mind, like, I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes solving whatever this problem is, based off of the level of difficulty or whatever it is. It may be, I'm not going to spend more than an hour if it's like a really technical conversation. For our customers, they had a much lower threshold than that total 9 minutes. So when we implemented our self-service tools, they were getting their answers and resolution to their problems within 90 seconds or less than 2 minutes. So for those customers that had that expectation of, I just want to get something done right away because, I'm on the way to dropping my kids off at school and I could just do a call while I'm in the car. We solved their problem and we got a much higher CSAT score. So we measure CSAT score for our self-service tool. We also measure it for our live agents, and we also measure it for a hybrid, which is they stopped halfway, we transferred to a live agent, and the live agent resolved it. Mm-hmm. We see our highest CSAT scores, we call them NSAT scores, across the self-service containment, and that's hovering around the 90%. As a whole, as an organization, across all of the self-served or not self-served or hybrid, we're in the middle to high 80% for our brands. So yeah, it was very surprising to us. Another surprise was after we implemented this voice bot, we got more volume coming into our call center, but it wasn't more volume going to agents. It was just more people recognizing that they can do actions on a regular basis with a self-service tool. And then they do those self-service tools and then are self-contained.
Well, that's a surprising result, but one that you're happy to have, I guess. Yes, absolutely.
Definitely happy.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, I'm going to ask this question because Shiva asked it a while ago, and he's referring to the natural language interactive demo, first of all. Mm-hmm. So his question is, what happened if the customer replied, no to the first question, what's the process after that?
Oh, we hang up, Bob.
Okay.
No, well, so one thing that we do not ever do is we do not ever make somebody repeat themselves. No, there's nothing that anybody hates more than repeating themselves. It's okay to repeat yourself to a human, but it's not okay to repeat yourself to an automated system. So we have a standard default response, that we would come back with. There's always a standard default response, that we will give that helps dig into the nature, of their problem. And in this case, I don't know exactly what it was that we would have followed up with, but we would have followed up with a more generic, billing question on how we could help them. But we have just noticed, and that we see this time and time again, that even when the AI, is predictive, and we use predictive algorithms when we believe that it stands an 80% chance of being true. And those other 20%, what happens to those other 20%? Do they get frustrated? No, they're not frustrated. They're actually impressed that the bot actually knew that level of detail about them, and it inspires their confidence to continue to actually help them resolve the real problem.
Okay, fantastic. And okay, so Artie mentioned that treat your AI like an employee. Don't put them in the back room and lock the door for 10 years. So my question is, how often does the application need to be tuned from, an ongoing operational standpoint, and how difficult is that to tune it and keep it on target?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could handle this one, and then Brian, maybe you could jump on and talk a little bit about what your team does on the back end as well. So and we've got two environments. We've got a build your own, do it yourself tool, and we also work with Smart Action on the phone side. So we have both examples. The do it yourself tool, we have a dedicated person who tunes it on a regular basis, literally at least once or twice a day. It is very time intensive. It's not a very fun and enjoyable role, because the person is going in, looking at 1,000 conversations a day and then categorizing them with tags. That's how frequent I would recommend. Some people don't do it that frequently. They do it maybe every year, every month. If you're starting out and you're learning a new intent, you have to do it more frequently. Over time, your confidence rates and your models will get better. So it's a little bit more of a set it and forget it, but you still want to keep your eye on it as things change, because your customers and members will start to say new terms or phrases that are different. You have to remember that we're a social media first company. So oftentimes the way that our customers interact with us, they use slang. So they'll say things like fire and hot, and that will be a positive slang for something like, a dress or shoes, like those shoes were fire. And we have to program it to understand that that is a positive intent or a positive word, as opposed to it is actually physically on fire. But working with Brian and Brian's team, we have a team on their side that do this on a regular basis for us. They do report backs to us. We've got weekly meetings to kind of look through all of the intent mapping and seeing if the confidence rates have changed. So I would say regular is the answer to both, but hopefully you don't have to do it all in-house.
Right. And just adding a little additional color to that, the uplift on that is really heavy, right after go live. That's when it is certainly the most intensive. Within the first several months, to first year of an application, you do reach a point of diminishing returns eventually, where because you're always looking for what is the number one reason why there's either a hang up or why there is a transfer to a live agent that might be confusion related. And so as you start going through that process, the next number one ends up becoming a pretty small number. We had the second largest hotel chain did a similar thing that Artie's doing with us here just a couple months ago. And they shared a slide actually on that kind of tuning process for them after go live. And on day one, it showed that 8% of all callers on day one were being transferred over to live agents, what we would call confusion transfers. The AI simply did not understand the grammars that were coming out of them to match to the right intent in order to deliver the self-service. So they showed a graph that over time that it took about 7 to 8 months, but the working with the team and putting in kind of the full course press effort, it took about 7 to 8 months to get that below 3% to about 2.5%. And when you hit that threshold around 2.5%, you're up against the threshold of what, can you go beyond that? I mean, now you're dealing with instances where callers are calling in, not even a human listening in would understand. Like the accent is so thick, or there's so much noise in the background. The whoever's listening in would have to re-ask the question themselves. And so it is a point of getting to that place of diminishing returns. And we see that after, about it on any given application, about a year, you have trained and modeled enough to where any change for there forward is more on the diminishing return side.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
and we have time for one last question. Okay, so is this solution mainly for large enterprises? I mean, Artie's hobnobbing with Kate Hudson and all of his fashionistas. How about if you own a smaller company and you're, how does that work? Does the solution work for smaller companies?
Well, then, maybe Artie, I'll kick it off and then you can wrap it up. At least for us on our side, clearly we like to march forward, our marquee logos that are recognizable logos for everyone. But we have a good footprint on our side down into the mid-market. What we see as the minimum threshold for change for anyone is do you have somewhere in the vicinity of 25,000 calls a month coming in, or 25,000 minutes a month, I should say, that could be handled by AI? If it's over chat or over voice combined, are you hitting that volume? If you are, then it's likely worth the cost and effort to build something and tailor it to your business and still show a good ROI, to the business. Now, if you're starting to fall under that threshold, you have to question, can we get the ROI out of this that we'd expect on the cost and effort that we would have to put into this to build it and tailor it to our business so the experience could be as good as a live agent?
Okay, fantastic.
And
Sorry.
little color on that too. So if you're doing it from scratch, you need a lot of volume to be able to, like if Google Dialogflow, for example, you need a lot of volume to train that AI. The benefit of going with a smart action is they already have the natural language training model to understand what people are saying and how they're saying it. They already have that massive amount of data from a linguistic standpoint. Now it's just utilizing them to have specific call flows and intent that make the most sense for your unique business model. So if you are a smaller company, you might want to use a partner like Smart Action versus trying to build it yourself, because you just won't have enough data to throw at it.
Okay, fantastic. And Artie, thanks so much for being, unequivocal when saying, "Hey, do it yourself," or contact somebody else. Don't do it yourself. That's why we like you guys as practitioners to show up and just tell everybody what they need to hear with your experience. So listen, that actually brings us to the end of the hour. I'd like to thank everyone that joined us today, everybody that chatted, asked questions. Especially like to thank Smart Action and our speakers, Brian Morin and Artie Kosaboom. Thanks so much for coming on. So thanks, everyone. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, don't worry, you'll get an email from us. You can send it to one of the colleagues in your company or review it. And there'll be plenty of information about this entire series on Destination CRM. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next and final session. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Artie.